speaking of the future, who is the top 25 NFL draft prospects to look out for this upcoming college football season and why?
So some of the guys that like really I think have established themselves at the top of this list for me, the four that I think are the most consistently and I think are the most likely to go in the top 10 that I love to talk about is Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan, Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. And then I'm a very, very big fan of what Mason Graham from Michigan as well is going to do this upcoming year.
The podcast where the mic drops happen. This is the SHAE Max Show.
Okay. Let's go. Get ready, let's go. They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. Don't let them stop you. Back against the wall, beat.
And welcome back to the SHAE Max Show. This is your host, SHAE. I am kicking off this episode with Mr. Joe Deleone. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Appreciate you having me on and excited to talk a little bit of football. Football's finally back.
Yep, it's finally back, but you know what? As much talk is going on about the NFL, the one season that's getting overlooked that had a huge pop last year was college football when, national champions were crowned. The Michigan Wolverines. Kind of sucked to see that as a Buckeyes fan, but before, we even get started on that, we're just going to kick off this episode the way we kick off every episode by allowing the special guests to introduce themselves, give their background in sports, how their careers got started, just basically give the audience an overall broad introduction of yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a host of the Ruffino and Joe Show and the First Team Podcast, as well as Hack City, covering college football. I played college football, Division I ball at the University of Rhode Island. Not super glamorous, not exactly the national championship Michigan Wolverines or with the Buckeyes, but fell in love with the sport and have had the opportunity to cover it for the past couple of years, and get the chance to talk draft, talk college football, and just excited that we've got some ball coming up this weekend. Though that's the one thing that I keep coming back to, that I can finally stop previewing and finally start reacting to some things happening.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. And the thing about that is, I don't think people understand this is where it starts when it comes to the NFL. This is where the best talent basically on paper starts. It's right here in college. And everyone asks us, okay, we get the players now, but who is going to be the future? College football determines just that. And that's the thing that just gets overlooked extremely. But finally, they are starting to slowly but surely climb up the charts and get the same pop as, the NFL gets. So based off of everything that I just said, how do you think college football evolved themselves from back then in the early days to now, where players are now getting paid for sponsorship deals, as if they're on contracts, they are now able to make themselves basically a decent living while just not even being pros?
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things to even go as far back as the 1940s, 1950s, before the NFL's just inception, it was almost taboo to even consider the possibility of playing professional football, because football was looked at as this opportunity for helping young men grow and develop their character and mature and all those things. And it's gotten to this point where you understand why for so long everybody was so apprehensive and against allowing for NIL and allowing for players to be paid. It was almost this just unquantifiable reasoning that those that were against it just kept saying, well, it's just never been that way. That's terrible reasoning. That's not good reasoning to not pay these guys. And I'm so excited, like having played and having been in a locker room with players that even some that got to transfer up to bigger programs and play in a bigger spotlight, to know that if you are one of the biggest players in the national landscape, you can profit off of that. You can market yourself. You can be a content creator. You can do so many different things to make yourself recognizable and make money off it. But I think the biggest part, and one of the things I've always pushed for when this was NIL was close to getting to that 1 yard line of getting pushed through, I was always saying that this is really great for players on teams that don't get national exposure. So sports like the Olympic sports like swimming or fencing, track and field, players that are at smaller universities like the one that I played at Rhode Island, that they can earn NIL opportunities just in their local communities. And for example, when I was at Rhode Island, near Gansett, Rhode Island, there's tons of restaurants and small businesses that were eager just to support the football program. And I know guys now that are getting small deals, but are getting to put money in their pockets that they don't have the ability to go work a job. They don't have the ability to make money while other students are able to do that. So to know that even to the highest level, these guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions, and you're seeing guys get private jet deals and those great things. Even to the lower levels, there's a lot of support, and I think a lot of people are benefiting from it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, because it's like, even though they had the full rides, just back to them days, some athletes didn't get the full rides. They still don't. And I think what people don't understand is that not every athlete on those teams are full, gets full rides or full scholared, and they're not fully covered. Some of them just heavily rely as well on financial aid, just like a student who isn't going to school for sports and things like that. And some just walk on, just become walk-ons as if they would if they're the pros. Not everyone's drafted, not everyone's recruited, not everyone's a 5-star, 3-star recruiter or recruitee. And that's just the fact that they get the opportunity now to make a living for themselves, say if they don't go pro, and they have to pay back all them student loans. Say that happens, because that's a possibility, and that gets overlooked. Now they have these, wages that they make from, say, commercial, say, say a car dealership, you never know, or a Nike or Jordan sponsorship, maybe Adidas, depending on, who the school runs on, what they prefer, who comes to them first, same as if you was on the level higher up. They now have something that they can rely on. They don't have to go out here and get themselves in legal trouble, because I remember a situation, this is as a native New Jerseyan. I'm a Rutgers alumni. I went to school for journalism. I remember, reading a story at one point. This was back then when I was in elementary school, where 5 Rutgers students, basically nearly their whole secondary, after their best season in the past 15 years, where they made it, I believe it was to the conference or the national title, somewhere like that, 5 students got locked up in Newark because they were robbing, they were, killing, things like that. They end up losing their full rides, but we look back at it, we still don't get the answers to why they did this. And there was money stolen, there was money involved, it was more opportunity to make a bigger bag. So I think the reason why they allowed this to happen, the NIL, thing came through, is to prevent situations like this, or give athletes a less excuse to pursue or commit things like, commit to things like that. And also it gives them more room to make a living for themselves and to take care of the loved ones that cannot take care of themselves. So, and it's beneficial, because if they are to go pro, they have a better idea on how to finance their money, budget their money. So it's more of a physical lesson of financial literacy. That's the way I'm looking at it right now, because it teaches them, like, okay, you get more than many. Here's the deal. It comes with more responsibility now. So now it's time for you to learn. You have to budget. You have to put some away for your books. You have to put some away for your food, your clothes, just your lively bills, but you also have to put some away for a rainstormy day. this is a good thing because it teaches them not only better life skills, but it also gives them great finance and allows them to take care of themselves throughout the 4 or 3 years that they attend school.
And this is, I'm glad that you bring all that context up, and that's probably like the biggest thing for me that I love to talk about, because like it's so easy when I do a national college football show. I also have produced national shows at other networks, and
We're going to talk about that.
The conversations are always about like, big time guys and their big time deals and everything. But I think it's really important to know that back end roster players that maybe even at a bigger program that do need the money and the support. Like I think of when I was playing, there were guys on my team who I would be there for just summer weight training, and I was lucky enough to have a car with me, but other guys, like I'd have to help them out and give them rides that had to get to jobs that were nowhere near campus because there weren't really a lot of, there weren't any restaurants or anything for them to go work near. That they had to figure out where they were going, how they were going to get there, and then during the summer work most of the day in order for them to have just money, pocket money to pay for their meals. They, at the same time, that's crazy. Some of these small schools, they don't have food for guys when they're there in the summer for when they're training. We didn't have food available to us, which was crazy. So just to provide opportunities for those people and just anyone that it needs the support when you're putting in all this time and in this effort into playing and helping better a university, better exposure for a university, it's something that is just crazy that in 40, 50 years from now, we're going to look back and say, how the heck did we let this go this long that players weren't able to benefit from their likeness?
Yeah. And, I just hope that it continues. I hope it continues to grow, but we got to roll the dice here because we got to talk about your podcast. First Team Podcast, which is a podcast, if I'm not mistaken, you cover the NFL.
Yep.
The NFL draft, and you also cover collegiate football. So how did that get started? When it got started, what was your motivation behind creating that show?
Yeah, so I co-host that with Ryan Roberts, who big NFL draft analyst with A to C Sports, and it kind of just fell together that when I was wrapping up my career playing at Rhode Island, I was doing some small coverage for FCS football, for lower level football, and I had been in just loose contact with Ryan and just talking to one another. I had always had just this love for the draft that when I was growing up, I would tune into every single one. I would sit through every single one. I would read up on every single scouting report. And it was one of the aspirations that I always had for myself that I want to be a draft analyst. And I've been able to actualize that. It's crazy. Whenever you're in the process of like trying to attain whatever your goal is, it's always crazy to think in the guts of it that you're just kind of grinding away and you're frustrated that maybe you're not where you want to be, but like you look at the progress you've made, and it's really cool that knowing, 15-year-old me knew that I had the opportunity to share my draft analysis on channels on Sirius XM and CBS Sports Radio. I think I'd be calling myself a liar if I tried to convince my 15-year-old self. But that show that I do with Ryan was kind of one of the first early catalysts for starting my hosting career and getting to do opportunities and do these guest appearances that I love doing.
Yeah, it's a pretty dope show. I actually watched a few clips of it before I asked you to be on here, and you started breaking down, the top prospects and things of that nature. But before we get into that, you also cover, correct me, college football on those shows. So let me ask you this: as college football is around the corner, what is to expect this upcoming college football season? So what should we be looking out for in general?
Mm-hmm. I think that the expectation this year is going to be a season, and you've mentioned this a couple of times, that like there is, I think, way more of a national attention to the game. There's more of a casual attention too, which is awesome for the sport. The main thing to expect is so much more competitiveness across the board. And I know that might sound a little vague, but we're in a year now where there is a first time ever, a 12-team playoff. Conferences have realigned. The Pac-2 fell apart, and all these new teams are in new locations. I think that this year is going to be one of the most highly competitive that we've ever seen, and there's going to be the most drama-filled as well. There's coaches that need to prove themselves, like Mario Cristobal at Miami and Ryan Day at Ohio State, that they can win a national title this year, at least come close. There are new faces at new coaching situations like Kalen DeBoer, who's at Alabama replacing Nick Saban. There is going to be
legacy right there.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that one's going to be really interesting to track, and I think a lot of people there's no one in the middle that's saying that they'll be good. It's either they're still elite and they're the best in the country, or they're going to completely fall off of a cliff. But I think what makes it exciting is that 25 teams for most of the year are going to be in that playoff conversation, and it's going to allow for more fan bases to be locked in and to be a part of the conversation.
Yep, I definitely got to look at that. So when you speak on the playoffs perspectives, who are your top teams that you are currently, right now, as of right now, who are your top teams that you are currently favoring to make the college football playoffs?
Yeah, the ones that I think that are the biggest locks, the four that like I really, really lean on. I think that Georgia is a Death Star again. They are unstoppable. They were one of the best offenses in points per game last year, despite having injuries to Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey for parts of the year. I think that offense is going to be even better, and we know that Kirby Smart is great at coaching defense. Ole Miss is another one in the SEC that did really some great work in the transfer portal, bringing in Princely Umamielen and Walter Nolan to bolster a defense that was inconsistent. Pete Golding, who's the defensive coordinator, is going to get those guys right who were former 5-stars and help them actualize their potential. Ohio State's a no-brainer with the way that team is coming back, and it sounds like a negative remark, but they are doing exactly what Michigan did last year. Not sign stealing. They brought back a lot of their upperclassmen that could have gone on to the NFL and been high draft picks, and they decided to come back for a potential championship run. And then I really think that Oregon as well in the Big Ten is going to be great this year. Dylan Gabriel, who was a quarterback who comes over from Oklahoma, fits the scheme that they're going to be running there. And then one more that I do kind of tend to bring up, but is requiring a lot of contingencies. They need to have a great season, but Notre Dame has a really, really favorable schedule. There's a lot of potential for them to make it into the playoff this year if they go 11-1.
Yeah, Notre Dame is, I'm not mistaken, in the ACC division. So it's like when you're in a division like that, you got Pitt, you may have Wake Forest, but what are your chances of relying, like how would you like your chances of playing teams like that and stopping a team like Notre Dame, who probably would have been in the playoffs if it wasn't for the likes of Georgia, Washington, Michigan, Bama, and many others like Ohio State, who just found ways to consistently have better records than them. So when you dealing with things like that, I think Notre Dame can be a dark horse pick. I think it would be safe to say, because the fact that they have everything except for consistency to keep stacking wins. And that's what hurts Notre Dame. I don't think it's more of the division or conference. I think it's the games outside of that hurts them a lot, and it crushes their postseason chances, because you're not even competing with teams in your conference 9 times out of 10 or your division to get to the postseason. It's these teams outside. So I just feel like if they can shape it up and become better at that, then they would definitely be a playoff team this year.
Yeah, and I think that to that point, this is the easiest schedule that like I remember them having in a very long time, and it goes in line with what you're saying. There's really no room for error. Marcus Freeman, who has been a great coach for Notre Dame, has faltered a little bit in some of their bigger matchups and seemingly have come a little bit unprepared. I think in his third year ever being a head coach, it's fair to give him a little bit of grace and some time to learn how to prepare his team better for those big games. And I think that this year they're going to be great, but they only really have 2 premier matchups on their schedule, which is Texas A&M in week 1, and then they get Florida State at home in November. They do go to USC, which I think that that's a winnable game for them. But if they lose 2 of those 3 games, the rest of their schedule is against back-end ACC teams. They got a very, very light showing of opponents that it's not going to be very impressive for them to be 10-2 and to beat up on a bunch of average to below average teams that they're going to be left out of the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And, I don't think Alabama's going to fall off as much as they should. I expect Ohio State to bounce back. I think Michigan's just going to pick up where they left off. I'm not sure if they're going to be the defending champions or not because I expect people and teams to be a lot better. So the road back to the national championship to be a lot tougher. But we cannot count out the Wolverines because what did they really lose? And then you can't forget about Clemson. You can't forget about, a lot of other teams. But shifting gears real quick because we have to speak on your other podcast show where you cover things like this, but you also cover the NFL draft, if I'm not mistaken, on this show as well. So the Ruffino and Joe show. Can you explain more of what that show is about and what can we expect for that show as college football is back, the NFL is around the corner, things of that nature? And
So
how did that get started?
this show I really fell in love with doing because it's blown up in the audience that we've been getting, and it's only been around for a year. This is our second season doing it. It just fell together when I at one point was working as a producer for Believe, which is the network that we're affiliated with, and I had some brief interactions with my co-host Blake at the time, and me and him were doing some Saturday morning content. We were doing some morning shows together, and we started to realize when we were doing these shows together for Believe that we love arguing with one another, and it is first take, it is undisputed college football type arguments where we come in with a few topics that we know that are going to generate a reaction from us and that are going to get people really galvanized in the chat. And every person I talk to gives the same feedback that I share when I describe the show. They love listening to us debate just because we love yelling at each other. But yeah, that show came together and it's been such a fun experience, and I've really loved working on it, and we're juiced up for what could be a really big second season for us.
Yeah, based off what you said and based off the analyst you gave, it sounds like an interesting show. I haven't yet gotten to it, but I'm definitely going to be watching it now because if you're telling me it's a debate show, it's a must watch because you want to hear what's being debated. And in debate shows, the cool part about that is it allows you to have a voice, even if you're not on the show. As an audience member, it allows you to have a voice because then it's whoever the people agree with the most is who won that debate, even if you feel differently. And that's the cool part about it. It's okay, they're on my side. So, hey, I just cooked you. Or your partner can come back and just say the same thing. So
you summed it up perfectly.
Like that, it's must watch. It's honestly.
Yeah. That's it. That is probably you psychoanalyze the two of us and the show that I do with Blake perfectly. I don't think anyone has ever given a better description of that, why people like tuning in. So I need to tell Blake that you said that because that's a really good way of describing.
Definitely. And you know what? I just hope that all is well on that show. Mm-hmm. But before I let you go, we got to get here because you are an NFL draft prospect guru along with a college football guru, which ties well together because of everything that was explained in the beginning of the show. This right here, this level, the NCAA level of football determines the future of the NFL. So speaking of the future, who is the top 25 NFL draft prospects to look out for this upcoming college football season and why?
So some of the guys that really I think have established themselves at the top of this list for me, the four that I think are the most consistently and I think are the most likely to go in the top 10 that I love to talk about is Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan, Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. And then I'm a very, very big fan of what Mason Graham from Michigan as well is going to do this upcoming year. Michigan, and you brought up, they're bringing back, they put out some guys to the NFL, but they're bringing back two of their best players this year, which is why I don't think there's going to be a significant drop-off for them, and they're still going to be really competitive in the Big Ten. But Will Johnson, super cerebral decision maker, tall, long athlete. Mason Graham, former wrestler. He's very physical. He's very low to the ground. He knows how to play with good leverage. Malachi Starks from Georgia is your prototypical Georgia defensive player who just knows everything that's happening before it happens. and he can stick with anybody in coverage very, very easily. And then James Pierce Jr., the last one, I think is this tremendously high ceiling to be the first overall pick in this upcoming draft. He has developed very quickly at Tennessee, wasn't a top recruit like some of these other guys, but is continually and quickly gaining recognition. It's really interesting, though, for this draft, and I think for NFL fans who are looking ahead for the upcoming season, expectations on like what are we going to get with this crop of guys. It's not going to be a lot of quarterbacks. There's going to be a lot of debates on who the top quarterbacks are. Shador Sanders is in the mix. It almost feels like it. There's really no answer. Quinn Ewers, Shador Sanders, Carson Beck, Cam Ward are all going to be discussed, but there's going to be so many elite defensive players that come out of the draft this year that are just going to be big-time playmakers.
Yeah, and the quarterback position is the toughest because everybody has a flaw in them or multiple. Yep. And you can argue that this might be one of the weakest of the quarterback position of the draft that we had in years since Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder year. So we it's a wait and see process, but I'm definitely excited about who's coming out from the defensive standpoint, but the offensive line is who I'm looking at more as a Steelers fan. And I'm just excited. But Joe, that's all I have for you right now. I would love again to thank you for joining the show, breaking down college football, ladies and gentlemen. College football starts if I'm not mistaken, less than 2 weeks. So if you're not ready, get your popcorn ready. If you have not already, for more NFL draft and college analytics, please follow Mr. Joe on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Joe Deleone. And yeah, that's all. This is your host, SHAE, signing out. And this has been the SHAE Mac Show.
Get ready, let's go! They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't